Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Dev Diary, where today we're continuing to work on our building action raft-like. Now last time we finally decided on a direction for our game and celebrated that decision with the addition of a bunch of stuff. We toyed around with the idea of a day-night cycle, resource chunks, and enemy loot. And while a bit too much time was spent on trying to figure out Game Maker's blend modes, we still managed to get a nice bit done. Now, before we could continue on with our plans, our spawn code needed some changing. Resources would now spawn based on the size of the raft. The Y spawn point would be determined by the topmost raft tile, while the X position would be based on either the left or rightmost raft tile. This change would bring the spawning code more in line with Void Train style of spawns, meaning fewer resources ending up under raft tiles. And as for this annoying color overlay that keeps flashing, well, this was part of an experiment to use another of Game Maker's filters, the color overlay, which works just like a shader requiring RGBA values instead of, say, hex values. And to make the transition between colors smoother, some basic math was used to ease each RGBA value from one time of day to the next. And using arrays to keep track of everything made this process a whole lot more simple, resulting in a much easier to digest transition between time of day, with morning being yellow, day being white, and night being dark blue. But the filter options and code to manipulate said options are odd. For now, this was the best that could be done with the limited amount of knowledge that I was able to cobble together. So, fingers crossed that this can be ironed out a bit more in the future. Next, the player's tether system was changed with the removal of the original teleport effect, and in its place, a reel system would be added. This would allow the player to reel themselves back towards the raft's origin point at the press of a button, thus giving the player an option to return to the base without having to deal with the void slowing them down. And theoretically in the future, this feature will be expanded on with being able to extend the tether and so forth, but for now the main goal was to replace the teleport functionality as it felt kinda out of place. So with the tether system now working, a new enemy type was added to the game, along with a new type of loot, a loot box. This enemy would act as a stronger, more dangerous foe, one that would drop a loot box upon defeating. Unlike normal resources, the player must open these chests, so a distance and key check were made. If a loot box is near enough, said loot box would be opened. The event would spawn a random assortment of resources, which is temporary for now, and then destroy itself. And unlike the new enemy, loot boxes would move with the void flow, so players will have to be attentive. And while these early results are kinda rough, they'll hopefully end up providing more incentives later on. These new enemies will likely be rare, with the loot being worth the battles, and a projectile or something just as dangerous will likely be their method of attack. And next time we'll likely focus more on enemy types to flesh these ideas out. There's actually a lot that still needs work, from the color overlay to the enemies and especially the spawn code, so while we've made some great progress thus far, we're still far from finished. But for now, this brings us to the end of today's episode of Dev Diary, so if you enjoyed today's entry, consider leaving a like, be sure to also subscribe and hit that bell if you haven't already, and let me know what you think of these additions. Are the color overlays too distracting? Leave your thoughts and opinions in the comments. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.